What's up, Sixers fans? This is the Sixers Talk podcast presented to you by Wilmington University. Wilmu works. No Danny Pommel's. Again, he's on vacation, probably in the Alps or somewhere. So hopefully, maybe somewhere warm, down in like the coast or something like that. But I'm Ben Berry. That's the one, the only Noah Levick from NBC Sports Philadelphia. You can follow him at Noah Levick on Twitter. Noah, how are you doing on this wonderful Friday morning?
Hey, Ben. Doing well. Yeah, Friday's never a bad thing. And we got an exciting Sixers game, final one before the All-Star break to talk about. So I'm doing quite all right here.
Oh, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. Noah just mentioned the exciting Sixers game, the win over the Bucks. We'll get to that later. Some fun that Allen Iverson is going to have tonight with Tracy McGrady. But we will start with Daryl Morey, Doc Rivers, Joel Embiid, and James Harden. It seems like it's been a bunch of narratives about each of them. James Harden, can he win the ring? Can he be the main player on the team? He's here in Philly. He's playing, I don't want to say second fiddle, but because that seems patronizing or passive aggressive, but he's number two behind Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, when we work together, he needs a better perimeter offensive player to play with. Doc Rivers won a championship. I guess this is almost 13 years ago now. Can he do it again? He failed with two different teams in LA. He's here in Philly now. Daryl Morey, the Sixers brought him in to get the Sixers to a championship level and get a big star, all-star caliber player, someone that can help elevate this team. So my question to you, Noah, out of those four individuals, Joel Embiid, James Harden, Doc Rivers, and Daryl Morey, who do you think is under the most pressure going forward for this organization to win a championship?
Yeah, with the little caveat that I think pressure is objective, and of course, all of these folks are putting a lot of pressure on themselves. My little pressure power rankings there, I'd have James Harden at number one. I think he's 32 years old now, and there's not that much time left for him to win a championship and be a star player on a championship winning team. And he told everyone he wanted to be in Philadelphia. That was his preference. And he, forced his way essentially out of Brooklyn to get to this situation where he feels he has the best chance to win a title with an MVP level player in Joel Embiid. I think all of that coincides with there being a lot of pressure on him. And now I think the expectations are ratcheted up even a little higher because he's rehabbing his hamstring and there's a lot of anticipation about what he'll bring to the table once he's back. I would then put Doc Rivers at number two. I think just inherently coaches tend to be judged in the NBA by what happens in the postseason, and that's obviously true to a high degree on this team in particular. Harden thinks very highly of Doc Rivers, so does Daryl Morey. All of that's great, but it's all about what happens results-wise. And, of course, the last postseason with Doc Rivers, the results were not there, and clearly he deserved a decent chunk of the blame for the Sixers not getting the job done against an inferior team in the Atlanta Hawks. And then I would probably put Joel Embiid next just because he's been an MVP sort of player in the regular season. So again, what's he going to be in the playoffs? I think everyone who loves basketball is hoping that injuries are not a factor finally for Embiid in the postseason and that he's at 100%. But regardless, I think you just wonder, is he going to be, sustaining this sort of play in the postseason? And then I think somewhat ironically, I put Daryl Morey last on that list just because I feel like he's already done the main thing he set out to do, and a little of the heat is off on him, at least for now. I think where Morey's concerned, the pressure probably becomes greater once we get to the offseason, and then that's more Morey time again. And of course, there's the question of, will James Harden indeed be a Sixer long term? And is that presumed lucrative extension that James Harden will eventually sign here going to be something that actually works out for this team? But that is how I personally would see it right now. But how about you?
It is interesting that you put it that way because we have some similarities, and your reasoning had me questioning mine and wanted me to change it. Right now, I have Daryl Morey under the least amount of pressure because he did what he was brought in to do. I think all these rankings can change, but he brought in James Harden. He brought in his guy, a perimeter offensive player that can create for himself and others, which Joel Embiid hasn't played with really since maybe Jimmy Butler, at least someone of this caliber, and not often in his career. So I think right now, Daryl Morey has the least amount of pressure on him. After that, and I feel like this might go against a lot of things I've said on previous podcasts the past year and a half, 2 years. It's probably Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers has his ring, even though I was in college when he got that ring. And he's blown 3 series leads, being up 3-1 in the playoffs, but he has that ring. He was ranked, listed as one of the top 15 coaches of all time. So even though there's pressure on him, I don't think there's as much pressure as there are on Embiid and Harden. Embiid, MVP caliber player, second up last year. Right now, again, after another crazy, great performance against the Bucks on Thursday night, he shows what he's capable of. He's done it in the playoffs, just not deep in the playoffs. When the Sixers got swept by the Celtics, put up phenomenal numbers. He just didn't have the help that he would have needed, or most players would have needed. He played outstanding last year in the playoffs as well. It would be nice to see it carry over and him even take it up another notch. But I have him number 2 because his old running mate is in Brooklyn, and I think no matter what happens moving forward, their careers will always be intertwined. And it'll be similar to Shaq and Kobe. Shaq got his 4th ring. He was at some party in Vegas or somewhere, like rapping, talk about how he got 4 and Kobe doesn't have any, only has 3 still. Kobe got 4 or 5, and Shaq said like he compares himself to Tim Duncan's and big men. So I think their careers will always be intertwined that way, and that's why I have Joel Embiid second. We agree on one. James Harden, he was the man in Houston, which seems like most of his career. It was most of his career. He was in OKC before that. They went to the finals. He was close in Houston, but they never got over that Golden State hurdle. They were 27 consecutive missed threes in a row from a possible NBA Finals berth, but it didn't happen. And with the perception around the country that he forced his way out of 2 teams in Houston and again in Brooklyn, I think there's just a lot of pressure on him moving forward to make this happen, to win a ring, and prove that he's more than just someone that fills up the stat sheet and gets his own. So that's how I have it. Daryl Morey 4, Doc Rivers 3, and Embiid 2. Most pressure is on James Harden.
I like your logic. Yeah, I think with Doc Rivers, of course, this is a massive challenge on his plate where the Sixers only have 24 games left. Sounds like the hope is that James Harden will be back after the All-Star break. I mean, he alluded in that press conference to the idea is post-break, he hopes to be full go with the hamstring, but 24 games is not that much time. And I even think back to the 2018-19 season when the Sixers first traded for Jimmy Butler and then made the huge deadline deal centered around Tobias Harris. And they were just scrambling that whole season to figure out what would work. And I think a lot of the answers weren't as obvious as they might have seemed on paper. Like sure, okay, you got 2 new starters in Harris and Butler, but as far as what the rotation should look like and how the team should play, and rather significantly there, who should be handling the ball, Jimmy Butler or Ben Simmons, it took a lot of time for the team to actually learn what worked best. And I think the hope here is that it's not the case, but realistically, it's just not something where you snap your fingers and your team is magic overnight. So of course that falls on everyone to integrate James Harden, and he plays a large role there. But I think that's the type of thing where coaches tend to be blamed when that doesn't work, as everyone envisioned. Doc Rivers, he's given the pieces by Daryl Morey, and now it's okay. Let's see what you can do with those pieces. So yeah, we're all curious to see exactly how he does. But I do think there's a decent chunk of pressure on him, and it's the blown leads absolutely shouldn't detract from his many accomplishments as a coach or fully define who he is. But I do think it's kind of unavoidable. And last postseason, it wasn't a blown 3-1 lead, but honestly, it was probably worse than some of those.
Worse. Yeah.
I think it probably was. Yeah, I mean, 18-point lead, 26-point lead, 2-1 series lead. They lost 3 times at home. They were the number 1 seed. It's just, of course, all the Sixers fans who watched it understands it's brutal, but just even stating those simple facts, I think illustrate how bad that was. And it's going to be really fascinating to see how he coaches these 2 stars this postseason. So we shall see. So
everything you just said, yeah, I still have Doc at 3. I do think there's pressure on him in those 3-1 leads, the 26 and the 18-point lead last year, losing 3 games at home to a inferior or talented team. I don't know if Hawks fans still watch this podcast on YouTube. I saw all the comments that me, Noah, and Danny are casuals. We all know what we're talking about. The Sixers were the better team until they weren't. It's just that I think most of the country, anyone that follows basketball would have picked the Sixers to win, but it just did not look good for Doc and not being able to make adjustments or failing at making adjustments. I will say this. I don't think unless the Sixers completely fail and flop in the first round, I don't think a coaching change will be made no matter how deep they go, unless it's just getting swept in the first round and an embarrassment. But still, I don't think it's a guarantee. That's the only way I could see it happening. I could, if they don't win it this year, unless they go out in the second round again, I could see Doc Rivers jumping to number 1 on my list of being under the most pressure moving forward if they lose in the second round 4-2. I don't know if that changes your perception, but I can see Doc Rivers jumping to number 1 on my list.
Right. I think the level of pressure of him is most closely tied to how they do in the playoffs, and then also what his stars think about him. I think Joel Embiid now, as you alluded to, is the unquestioned number 1 star, which is unusual for James Harden's career. Usually he's been the number 1 guy, at least during the time in Houston. But I do think, of course, it's significant that Doc Rivers is a coach that James Harden has sought before, wanted to be coached by him and thinks he's one of the best coaches ever. And I think all of that's great and works in Doc Rivers' favor and indicates that Harden is super receptive to Rivers' coaching and eager to be working under him now. But, the hope, of course, is that the possibilities there come to fruition and that it is indeed a fruitful relationship. So we shall see, but the league is all about stars. That's how Daryl Morey operates, and I think that's true also with Doc Rivers. Just how well does he coach those stars, and what kind of relationships do they have with him? So it's the on-court product, and then it's also the personalities involved. And so far, to Rivers' credit, the relationship with Joel Embiid seems to be really strong. Of course, the results are very much there. And now the question is what exactly that's going to be like with James Harden.
It will be fun to watch it all play out. Noah said 24 games left in the regular season. Then it's the playoffs, baby, what we all get excited about. We're going to take a quick timeout, come back, talk about the Sixers win over the Bucks and everything else headed into the All-Star break.
Start college,
build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilMU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu. No, the Sixers came up big Thursday night with a big win over the Milwaukee Bucks, the defending champions. A monster game from Joel Embiid, dropping, 40-plus points, 42 points, 14 rebounds. End of the game, he picked up Giannis, even though George Niang did a pretty good job, in my opinion, throughout most of the game, which I would have never predicted going into it. But Joel Embiid picked him up, defended Giannis at the end of the game. Tyrese Maxey had a good game. I think Tobias Harris showed us what we just want out of him for the most part. What were your takeaways from the big one over the Bucks?
Right. I think first and foremost, showdown between two MVP contenders, and not to take anything away from Giannis Antetokounmpo, who had a solid 32, 11, and 9, but Joel Embiid was the best player on the floor. 42 points on 21 field goal attempts, 14 rebounds, 5 assists, despite Milwaukee sending, as always, 2-3 defenders his way whenever there was a chance to do so. I think just the sheer variety of his scoring was astounding last night, hitting step-back threes and fadeaways late in the shot clock, and gave the Sixers a 1-point lead late in the game with a shot right out of the Dirk Nowitzki book, the little one-legged fadeaway. So just stepping up on a big stage. And let's not forget also the game after the Sixers were kind of embarrassed at home by the Boston Celtics and lost by 48 points. Not every game's big, and it wouldn't be the end of the world if they'd lost this, but the fact that they did pull out a victory was so important, and Joel Embiid, of course, is the primary reason why they got that done. I guess my other main takeaway from this game is he didn't coach a flawless game, but Doc Rivers hit a lot of the right buttons in this one. George Niang started, replaced Danny Green in the starting lineup, and ended up playing 40 minutes and 40 good minutes, both in terms of being solid on Giannis, albeit, of course, with a ton of help defense factoring into that equation, and then also putting up 10 threes and making 5 of them and taking a fourth quarter charge on Giannis and just playing tough, solid basketball, and then doing what he does, which is put up jump shots and make a good percentage of them. And then the other big call I think Rivers made in game was he went away from Matisse Thybulle, who started, but the Bucks were not showing him any respect defensively. Giannis was technically guarding Thybulle, but serving as a defensive roamer, and Thybulle wasn't making Milwaukee pay. He only took one shot and passed up several others and looked really shaky and ineffective offensively. And Doc Rivers turned to Furkan Korkmaz in the second half, and Korkmaz, to his credit, knocks down a couple of threes, extends the Sixers' lead, and that decision again looks like a smart one from Doc Rivers. And then the final call here was Paul Millsap was the backup center, and still looked like an NBA player, I think, at 37 years old. Obviously not the most agile guy, especially at his age, but I thought he was really solid and had some nice moments, had a little jump hook over Bobby Portis and ran a nice pick and roll with Shake Milton, and just, I think, did pretty well in the 11 minutes he played behind Joel Embiid. And you figured maybe Paul Reed would have played in this game because he had some impressive moments the last time the Sixers played the Bucks defensively on Giannis. But again, to Doc Rivers' credit, going with Millsap as the Paul in this game as opposed to Reed was the correct call. Overall, great way for the Sixers to head into the All-Star break. Joel Embiid, the star as always, but Doc Rivers ultimately, made, I think, a few very important decisions that helped the Sixers win this game as well.
Ooh. I'm gonna come back to Doc. I think he made a lot of great decisions, but I'm gonna come back to Doc. Joel Embiid just being dominant through and through. I love that he reattempted the James Harden step back in this game, and he actually hit it. A step back, fading away three. And when he's just hitting from deep, there is nothing a defense on this planet can do unless you probably have 5 Giannis's on defense. It's just nothing that can be done. What I love was how engaged James Harden was on the sideline. I remember it was a timeout, I believe, in the second quarter. I don't know what he said to Tyrese Maxey. It seemed like he was communicating something different than the coaches. Not saying he was causing division, just he had a conversation with Maxey. Maxey went out there and dropped 14 points, and Harden looked like he was yelling, "That's how you do it," or "That's what I'm telling you." He was just very encouraging. He had a nice moment with George Niang as well on the sideline. That was my biggest takeaway, and I love to see every minute of it. So for all the reports or people saying that James Harden is a bad locker room guy, I don't know about OKC. I don't know about Brooklyn. I don't know about Houston. So far since he's been here in Philly, the way he's talked about teammates, seeing him engaged on the sidelines, I've loved every minute of it. Every minute of it. So to Doc Rivers, I think he coached a great game, and I'm not going to go over everything you just said. There was one thing I never want to see again: a Millsap, Niang, Green, Korkmaz, Milton lineup. I laughed, but I don't ever want to see that again.
Fair enough. I think there will be less opportunities for him to throw out those sort of lineups because, of course, he'll have more top-end talent once James Harden is healthy. But, yeah, I think we're all curious to see exactly how he staggers these key players. He sort of said initially that he sees it as Harden, Embiid, Harrison, Maxey. It's now about coming up with the best pairs, so figuring out which duos play best together. And I think that's most likely going to be a work in progress, and that he's not 100% sure yet. But yeah, the heavy bench lineups we've seen throughout his time in Philadelphia, he likes turning to those, and he likes the idea of having all of his best players out there at once. And I just think often that has backfired. And, you know, again, he probably won't be doing as much of it moving forward, but again, that does remain to be seen. But yeah, great point with James Harden. He was doing some vocal assistant coaching there, and so far so good. As far as being really supportive and rooting his teammates on in these couple of games from the bench. And it is funny, Tyrese Maxey all of a sudden is taking double-digit free throws. 2 games in to the James Harden tenure. So a little of that has rubbed off on Maxey. And, I think with Tyrese Maxey, of course, there are a ton of promising skills here already, but that's one of the areas where there's clearly a lot of room to grow, drawing free throws and being aggressive as a driver and bumping into guys and playing physically. And James Harden is certainly going to encourage him to do those things, which is nice to see as if you're a Sixers fan, I think.
Great to see. One last point I wanted to make on just the good sides of the game. Tobias Harris, I've been very critical of him his entire time here in Philly. And before he got to Philly, I think last night is just what I would say I ask of him. I think most of the city as well. Wasn't a great game by any means. 9 from 20 from the floor, 0 for 4 from beyond the arc. But he put up 19 points. He was decisive when making decisions. When he had open shots, he just took them from beyond the arc. If he put the ball on the floor, he made a quick move and either went up for a shot or passed it back out to someone else. I didn't see any pounding of the ball and muddying up the game from Tobias Harris. And whether he's an all-star or not ever going forward or live up to this contract, that's not what I'm talking about. Just his game last night. I would like to see more of that. Anything the team can do where he could just be more decisive is a win in my books.
For sure, and I think it was important because in that first quarter that he got 10 of his points there because Embiid had 12, Harris had 10, and the rest of the team had 2. So they really needed him to start hot and start aggressively, and as you said, be taking the shots that were available. Because I think if the Sixers had fallen into a hole here, of course, then it would have been natural to perhaps start thinking back to that Boston game, and things could have gone south. So just his aggressive mentality from the jump, I think, was very positive. And I think just overall, Thybulle's reluctance to shoot stood out in this game because that wasn't the case from anyone else on the Sixers.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, all the other guys on the court, including Tobias Harris, I think when the ball came their way and there was an open shot, they fired it up without hesitation. That needs to be the case moving forward, especially when James Harden is on this roster, because he's going to create a lot of drive and kick opportunities and skip passes out of pick and rolls, and he is going to set guys up. And when the shot is there, they need to take it. And last night, I think, was the blueprint again outside of Matisse Thybulle on that front.
All right, before we get out of here, Noah, something a little interesting, different happening here not here, but All-Star Weekend. Allen Iverson, Sixers great Hall of Famer, and Tracy McGrady, who allegedly, reportedly almost became a Sixer once, they're having a highlight battle. I assume it's going to be similar to some of these rap and band battles over the past 2 years where artists and bands, they pick 20 songs and just let the crowd decide who just brought more energy and a better song. So I think what Allen Iverson and Tracy McGrady are doing, they're going to pick a handful of highlights and just figure out who had the better highlight reel. Is that something you would be interested in from retired vets and Hall of Famers going forward? And is there anybody you would want to see do a highlight battle?
That's interesting. Yeah. I'm curious what it is. I think I'll give you a better answer there once I check this out. I think, on paper sounds fun. Some of the great dunkers definitely come to mind, like McGrady's cousin, Vince Carter. That would be a fun one. But Allen Iverson would be one of the first ones on my mind. I think, I would probably favor Iverson in this particular battle just because McGrady had that effortless style in some ways. And I think with Iverson, obviously being undersized and doing a lot of, his greatest work against players who towered over him, that tends to make it a little bit more impressive. But yeah, it'll be fun to see what that's all about.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to catch some of it. As long as it's definitely under 10 minutes. I don't need 20 minutes of highlights. I think 5 minutes is a good place, maybe 3 to 5 minutes. Iverson, if you're someone that loves handles and crossovers, I think fans will lean towards Iverson. If you want to see people get dunked on repeatedly, you'll probably lean towards Tracy McGrady. If I can watch two greats, man, I would lean towards Vince Carter or Dominique Wilkins, two dunkers. I think if this is something the league or whoever's hosting this does for it should be maybe two guys with handles or two guys who are just known for dunking. I'm not saying that's all they did, but just to even it out, because you want to do a pop artist versus a rock band, or you want to do Jay-Z. You want to do Meek Mill versus Rihanna. You want similar styles. So music, exactly. I would expect the same from highlights. So
same genre. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, so that was the Sixers Talk podcast presented to you by Wilmington University. William U. Works. He's Noah Levick. Follow him on Twitter at Noah Levick. You can follow me, Twitter, Instagram at I am Ben Berry. Maybe Danny Pomels will be back next week. Maybe he'll go. He's rich. Maybe he'll go to outer space or something. I don't know. But we'll talk to you next week after the All-Star game. Peace.